over in the mall, or maybe the further afield. It looks like we've got most of the people gathered back here, which is great. So now we have our featured special guest this afternoon, Joe DiPenta. He's a native of Barrie, Ontario. Grew up in Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia. Not sure what's in the water over there. He's an NHL player. And played 2 years at Boston University before spending a season with the Halifax Mooseheads. Drafted by Florida in 1998. He appeared in the NHL with the Atlanta Thrashers. 3 games?
3 games.
And
first NHL goal.
First NHL goal and the Anaheim Ducks. He is part of a unique club that played for both a Calder Cup and a Stanley Cup champion. So welcome to Joe. He's going to give us his story and lessons learned.
I held the Stanley Cup above my head for 6 seconds. Is it heavier than it looks? It is. Well, when you're lifting it for the first time, it seemed pretty light, but it's 35 pounds, so it's fairly bulky too. So I lifted that cup. It was an amazing feeling. But I often get asked, what was it like to lift the Stanley Cup? And so the best way for me to describe it is through the lens of the team that we beat, the Ottawa Senators. Okay, it's through the lens of their eyes. And so before I explain what I mean by that is, when we compare the Ottawa Senators to the Anaheim Ducks, they're fairly similar. Okay, so here's some of the similarities. So get this going here. Okay, so we had 50 regular season wins, and the Ottawa Senators had 48 regular season wins. Okay, so fairly close on our records on the year. We were the 2nd seed in our conference, in the Western Conference. The Ottawa Senators were the 2nd seed in the Eastern Conference. And on our way to win the Stanley Cup, we had to defeat 3 great teams. So did they. And that included in the semifinals, both of us had to beat the #1 seed in the conference in order to advance to the finals. So very similar seasons in terms of accomplishments and achievements on the year. Now this is what the Ottawa Senators had to watch when we were celebrating at the other end. Because as you know, there's a tradition in hockey that you wait around and you shake hands at the end of a playoff series. So they had the unfortunate circumstance of having to wait to watch us celebrate before we lined up and we shook hands with each other. So if you put yourself in their position, what do you think some of the feelings were when they had to watch us celebrate at the other end?
Great disappointment. Sad.
Disappointment. I heard disappointment. Sadness.
Maybe frustration.
Frustration.
There's always next year.
There's always next year. I'm sure they probably weren't feeling that at the moment, but that is. Hopefully that would have been the silver lining. Maybe somebody said that. That would have been nice. But here's some of the looks on their faces, just to give you a bit of a closer vantage point of what their faces. They show their feelings through their faces. And then we've got Chris Phillips here. See, I think it's all those things you guys mentioned. Okay. And so when I like to explain it that way, because when I lifted the Stanley Cup above my head, the feeling I had was relief. Relief that I wasn't going to have to live in regret. Okay, all of the players that played, there was say 25 guys on the roster. All of the guys on Ottawa, of all those guys, only one of them, Chris Kelly, went on to win a Stanley Cup after that. Okay, so that means there's 24 guys today without a Stanley Cup ring. They got ever so close, made it to the finals, but never actually achieved it. So that's how I like to frame up. What was it like to win the Stanley Cup? It was a feeling of relief. I've got a bit of a video here I'm going to share with you guys. John's going to cue it up. This was the video from the Hockey Hall of Fame. The person that was videotaping this was the keeper of the cup, and he even had a little handheld thing. He sent it to me, and this is a vantage point of me lifting the cup. That's Francois Beauchemin passing me the cup. And those are my 6 seconds right there.
That's quick.
See, when you're lifting it, you realize there's 30 people behind you that all want to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And you quickly realize, okay, that was nice. Now I got to give it to somebody else.
Who did you give it to?
I passed it to Travis Mullen. Travis and I were roommates on the road, and our wives are really close. Okay, so those are my 6 seconds. That's how I like to explain what that felt like. Now we'll flip to the next one, John. Could stay here all night and watch that. All right, so I got a question for you guys. This is the Stanley Cup ring. I brought it with me. So after the talk, if you guys want to get some photos with it, feel free to. You can put it on, snap a photo. It's a little heavier than you would expect. But there is a little question I like to ask around how many diamonds do you think are in this Stanley Cup ring? 40? 40, 60? No, not 2,000, not 60. Just shout it out. 4? No, more than 4?
24.
More than 60?
100.
100 is getting closer.
How big are the diamonds?
You can look after. You can look at it after. There's 110. Does anyone know why there's 110 diamonds in the ring?
110%.
110%? No, that's a good guess. So I haven't heard that one. That's a good guess. Other guesses as to why there's 110 diamonds in the ring.
Number of games.
Number of games?
Effort, 110 effort.
No, that's a good guess. It's not.
Season playoffs combination.
No, these are all really good guesses. So I'm just going to tell you because I'm torturing you guys here. It's 110 points we had during the regular season. All right, so all really you guys were in the ballpark for sure. We had 50 wins and 10 overtime losses was our record during the regular season. So they put 110 diamonds in the ring. I'll give you a little bit of since we're on this, and I know you guys are historians. This was the first time in California a California NHL team ever won the Stanley Cup. So on the side it has California's first cup. You guys will be able to see it up close if you come and have a look. 16 wins and 5 losses was their record in the playoffs. Interestingly enough, there are 16 big diamonds that make up the Stanley Cup in the face of the ring. So you can see it here. This is the top of the cup. You can see the diamonds here. So this diamond here is the 16th diamond. That represents a 16th win against Ottawa in the playoffs. All right. On the other side, it has the player's last name, and then it has the player's number, and then of course everyone would remember the Mighty Ducks, right?
Yeah.
So Disney bought the team in 1993. They put a 93 to symbolize that. They put a Mighty Duck symbol. The new owners bought the team in 2004, 2005, and they put green diamonds for every year they were owned by the Disney Group, and then a white diamond to symbolize the sale of the team. It was also the lockout season in 2004. And then they put 2 orange diamonds to symbolize the new ownership. So there's a lot of thought that went into this ring. And I'll touch on that a little bit more once we talk about Brian Burke and some of the things we went through during that season when I get later into the story. Okay, so 110 diamonds. I want to start at the beginning. This was me when I first started hockey in Cole Harbour. People often say, was there something in the water in Cole Harbour? I don't know if there's something in the water, but there was definitely something in the air and the culture. We loved hockey. Hey, I was just a little boy that loved to go out in the street and play street hockey. That was it. That's what it boils down to. I never dreamt in a million years I'd lift the Stanley Cup. I never dreamt that I'm getting inducted into the Nova Scotia Sports Hall of Fame this month. I never thought that would happen. What an honor. I was just passionate about going out in the street after school and shooting that ball around. That's what it boiled down to. I fell in love with the game by accident. My parents were not involved in hockey. I was a firstborn, and my mother said, I'm going to keep my little son Joey out of trouble. And so she gave me they put a hockey net in the basement, and I took to it and loved to skate, and then they combined the two. That's how it started. Okay, so that was me. I did look up to people like Cam Russell, the general manager of the Halifax Mooseheads, who played 10 NHL seasons with the Chicago Blackhawks. He was a role model for me. He was 10 years older than I was, but it was somebody that I saw that was achieving his dream, and that's what I aspired to. Never really imagined or thought it was going to happen, but it was definitely a dream that I had as I got older and older. Okay. One of the first lessons I want to share with you guys. I don't know if we skipped a slide there. Is there a slide before that one, John?
No, it just goes from your early days in Cole Harbour to.
Okay. I don't need a slide. So when my dreams got more real as I got to about 15, 16 years old, I had to make a decision whether I was going to go play major junior hockey, or I was going down to the States, pursue university hockey. I ended up doing both. I was part of the Canada Games team in '95. Interestingly enough, Chris Phillips was the star of that tournament. He was the first overall pick of the Ottawa Senators, and we saw his picture. Not that I'm trying to rub it in, but like we had a history later on, which was kind of cool that we crossed paths back when we were 16 years old. I ended up going to prep school, playing high school hockey down in Boston. So played in Groton, Mass. Went to Lawrence Academy for a year, and then I ended up going to Smith Falls. So all the Ontario guys, a shout out to you guys that played in Ontario for a season, and then I ended up going to Boston University on a full scholarship. Played 2 years there, ended up going to the Mooseheads, and it was during that time at the Mooseheads that I learned the first valuable lesson. Okay, was that it had to do with fighting in hockey. Okay, because I was never in a fight. I grew up in a lovely neighborhood, didn't have to fight. It was something that was foreign to me. And when I first joined the Mooseheads, I had this premonition that I wanted to play professional ice hockey. So of course I knew that fighting was part of the game back in 99, 2000, just as it is today, but even more so back then. And so I started to take boxing lessons in the off season for 2 or 3 years. And I was a strong kid. I worked out hard. And so I came into the Mooseheads training camp probably about 215 pounds, 20 years old, much bigger and stronger than say your 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old. I was above average on size. And I said, first game, I'm going to get this out of my system. And not that I wanted to get it out of my system, it was just that I was like, I didn't want to have to deal with the anxiety around it any longer. And so the first game, it was at the Scotia 1 in Cole Harbour, my hometown arena. I had all of my friends and family in there to see my very first Mooseheads game. So you can imagine it's sold out, not because of me, because it's always sold out, but there's typically lots of fights in the training camp. So I get into a fight, and I think probably the first period, I initiated the fight. Somebody hit me, and all of a sudden I cross-checked him, and then we dropped our gloves, and I dropped my gloves first. And he was like, okay, I guess I have to. He was 17 years old, and he was like, I guess I have to fight. And so we started off, we squared off, and I never learned how to fight on the ice except for hitting the punching bag, right? So I threw the first punch without grabbing on, and that was a big mistake. I threw the punch, off balance the rest of the fight, and needless to say, I did not win that fight. Now, the guy I was fighting was from Sackville, which if you're from Dartmouth, you know there's tough guys in Sackville, so that's my excuse. He was in lots of fights, presumably being from Sackville, and I wasn't being from Dartmouth, but it was really tough for me, like emotionally really hard for me. I had all of these people were here to watch me, and I felt embarrassed. I felt, that I let people down for some reason. And I even had like a friend call me afterwards. He said, Joe, you're really, I want you to know it's okay. Like, I saw you after the game and you were really upset. And so it didn't help that the next day in the newspaper, the headline of the Daily Sports section, it had my photo on the front of it. And when I read the headline, it said, those hands were not made for fighting. So as a 20-year-old, and if anyone has seen the Mooseheads, you guys saw the game last night, you notice how young they are? Like when I was 20, I thought I was all grown up, right? Well, I was a kid, and as a kid, this was really hard for me. Okay? It'd be hard for me even today if they put that in the paper and said something that wasn't nice, right? So it plagued me the rest of the season. I had a hard time just knowing that I might get into a fight and I could get embarrassed, and I didn't get hurt, it was just the embarrassment of it all. So I shied away from it. And that wasn't a good thing, because I needed to overcome that in order to get stronger in my hockey development, and I couldn't play it with fear if I was going to expect to make that next level jump to the NHL. So the good thing is the next team I joined after the Mooseheads was the Philadelphia Flyers organization. Exactly. They had their lineup, the guys that were in their front office were guys like Bobby Clark, Paul Holmgren, Ron Hextall. Their coaching staff were full of former tough guys. They prided themselves on fighting. When I showed up, before training camp started, I was there for a week to get in conditioning, and there was a guy running around on the ice trying to fight everybody. And he was going to be one of our teammates. I ended up getting into a fight with him before training camp even started, and I didn't throw a punch. I just kind of wrestled him around. But it was like, what's happening here? And this was all by design, because I needed to overcome this fear. That was one of the things was a big thing for me in my development. So I get into my very first game in the American Hockey League, and I get into a fight, and I get my nose broken. Okay, get my nose broken. It was a good effort, but as soon as I got hit right here, I was done. That was it. I didn't want to fight anymore. And so I played another 3 more months without fighting. I was doing everything I could not to fight. it was a really big challenge for me. And then I noticed that my play started to decline like this. And then there was a moment where my mother came down to visit me, and it was after Christmas, sometime in the January time frame. And I was a firstborn child, bit of a mama's boy. And she was always overprotective of me. And I remember sitting down with my mom in the living room of my apartment, and I remember having a conversation with her, and I said, Mom, I'm having a really hard time. They want me to fight. And what I thought she was going to say was, Joey, don't worry. You come home with me after the season's over. It'll be okay. There's mean people down here. Like you don't need to do that. And what she said to me was, well, Joe, I guess you better start fighting. And I was floored that my mother would say that to me, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. And the reason why she said that is because she knew how much work and effort I put in to getting to that point in my life, and how much all these dreams and hopes I had to play in the NHL. And it was the best advice I could have ever gotten. Okay? 2 games later, I had it in my mind that I was going to get into a fight, and then the opportunity presented itself. There was a player on the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. Okay, I was playing in the Philadelphia Phantoms at the time, the arch rivals, and he was picking on one of our Czechoslovakian players. And so he was pushing him around in front of the net. I went over to him and pushed him back. And next thing you know, the referees are breaking us up, and I was on top of him, and my entire bench was standing up cheering. And it was just a split-second thing, and it happened, and it was over really quickly. And I just felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off of my shoulders. And I realized at that moment that it didn't matter if you won or lost or what it was about. It developed self-confidence that I was able to stick up, overcome this, and I ended up getting in about 5 more fights over the course of that season. And I don't know if this video will work or not, but this is one of the fights. Oh, those slides are just reversed, I guess.
What's part of the projector thing? Or are you doing it?
This is,
Sorry, John, I'm flipping. You're trying to flip too, right?
yeah, so right there, right?
So we could flip through the road to the pros. That was the slide. I think it was in the wrong order. This one here. So this is the video. So this is me getting into a fight right after I won the first fight. I got into another fight. I was all confident, and so I'll set it up for you. So I got into a fight with a guy in front of the net, and I win in this fight. Like I'm hitting him like 3 or 4 times, and I think, man, why isn't he hitting me back? And I didn't realize he was a left-hander, and so I let it play out. I don't know if that'll work. It's a YouTube.
Yeah, like I'm waiting.
There's a goal scorer, yeah, that's Smith, taking up for the team, but watch, that left saves the best, and this is the best part.
Is that the right one?
It didn't show on the screen, but that was the right one.
Oh, sorry guys. Oh yeah, it flipped to YouTube, so I could. Apologies.
That's okay. We'll just keep going. Anyway, he hit me with a left, and he dropped me like this, and then went into the penalty box, and then kind of pretended like I was off balance. And I didn't get hurt, but what I realized is that it didn't matter if I won the fight or lost the fight. It was about showing up, sticking up for myself, and that's what I needed to do in order to overcome this challenge. And what it meant was when I went into the corner, I wasn't afraid of getting into a fight. And over the course of my 11-year career, I was in almost 50 fights, okay? So like, I eventually overcame it. I'd fought a handful of times a year, and I'd stick up for teammates, and it was a big part of helping me get to where I wanted to go, which was to the NHL, ultimately. All right, so I'll flip to the next one there, John. Okay, I did take karate lessons in the summer, and the Philadelphia had a good connection with the sensei down there, and so I took karate lessons, and eventually they got to me to a respectable place in fighting, and that was me connecting with one of my punches when I was playing for Chicago Wolves. Okay, so thought I'd throw that in there too. All right, so one of the other lessons I learned was about identity. So as a player, playing for the Mooseheads, I had 63 points, or 56 points, I think it was, 56 points as a defenseman. Pretty respectable numbers for a defenseman. And I was always considered kind of a guy that could do all of the things pretty well. Offensively, wasn't too bad. He was growing up. But when I turned pro, I realized that like skill level wise on my team, I was probably down to the bottom, like the 5th or 6th defenseman. It didn't come as easy as it had all of those other years. So I had to reinvent myself, and that I didn't know how to reinvent myself. I just always known, you give me an opportunity and eventually I succeed. Well, I was given opportunity and it wasn't coming as easy as it had in the past. So I had a coach named Randy Carlisle. Randy is a Norris Trophy winner in the NHL. Played for Toronto Maple Leafs, Pittsburgh Penguins, Winnipeg Jets. Never wore a helmet. Probably you guys, some of you may remember him. I used to have his hockey card as a kid. And when I met Randy, I wasn't sure if I was going to like him. And the reason being is that in the summertime I had a guy I skated with, and he told me, oh yeah, he wasn't a fan of Randy's. He didn't have a couple of things he said, like he just doesn't understand how to coach different players. Because he's a guy that was always good at the game. He just didn't know how to relate. And so I went into that training camp. When I met him, I didn't think I was going to like him. But eventually, he became the most influential coach in my career. And it was in that year in Manitoba. I was playing for the Manitoba Moose. It was a lockout season. And I had decided that this was my 5th year playing the American Hockey League. If I didn't make the NHL, that was going to be it for me. So Randy sat me down at the start after training camp, and he asked me, he said, Joe, he said, what kind of player are you? And given that he was going to be my head coach, I wanted to impress him. I said, well, Randy, I can do everything. You put me on the last minute of the period, be responsible, I'll make the good first pass, put me on the second power play unit, I'd kill penalties. Basically, I can do anything you want. That was my response. I was just trying to cover all the bases. Because I didn't know why he was asking that. Nobody had ever asked me that question before. And he said, Joe, well, I don't see you playing on the power play. And I thought to myself, that hurts. But I think you could play in the NHL. Now he had my attention because he knew where I wanted to go. And he said, Joe, I want you to be the shutdown defenseman for our team this year. I said, well, what does that mean? He said, I don't want you to let the other team score when you're on the ice. That's it? But yeah, just don't let the other team score. And he said, I don't want you to make any soft plays around the red, like the blue line areas where that's like a very vulnerable place to turn the puck over. He said, if you get into trouble, I want you to shoot as hard as you can off the glass and down the ice. I don't care if it goes for ice. I don't care if you ice the puck 10 times a game. If you get in trouble, off the glass and out. And he simplified everything for me. He simplified my game. He allowed me to just come into my own and simplify, and that's what my focus was. So over the course of the year, that's what I did. I didn't let the other team score when I was on the ice. And that little change, that pressure of trying to be everything to everybody and to be on the score sheet when that wasn't my unique ability necessarily, it freed me up, and now all I cared about was my plus minus and making sure that I wasn't getting scored on when I was on the ice. And as a result, my play went like this. I ended up getting this award at the end of the season as one of I think the top defensive player on the team. And my nickname was, when in doubt, DiPenta and out. Instead of off the glass and out, it was DiPenta and out. Okay, so that was a little saying they had. But eventually I earned the nickname Joe Dependable as well, because when I was on the ice, he could depend on me. He actually one of the best compliments Randy ever paid me was, I was in a golf tournament. Randy was golfing in front of me, and he was with a group, I was with a group, and we were on the same tee box together. And my group asked Randy, what type of player is Joe DiPenta? I guess they didn't know who I was, so that's fine. But they asked, what type of player is Joe DiPenta? This was in Anaheim. And he said, I would trust Joe with my firstborn baby. So I thought, wow, that's a pretty great compliment. And so that was my role. Don't let the other team score. So fast forward, after the season was over, I was a free agent. I turned down an offer from the Vancouver Canucks for 2 years. Now, to put that into perspective, I never got more than one contract offer in an off season. So for me to turn down a contract offer meant I might not get another contract. But I was on the golf course with my dad. The Vancouver Canucks called my agent. My agent called me, and my agent said they're offering you a two-way deal for 2 years, and if you don't sign it by the end of the day, the offer is going to be going away. Tomorrow, free agency. That's it. And so we thought about it. My dad said, I think you should call your agent back and tell him to expletive off. And the reason being is because they called you at the last minute, try to put a gun to your head, and to force you to sign this contract. And so that's what I did. I took a chance. The following week, Randy Carlisle got the head coaching job in Anaheim, which was a surprise to everybody. And then my phone rang about a couple days later saying, hey, Randy loves you. Why don't you try out for the Anaheim Ducks, Mighty Ducks at the time. So like those things, you never know how they're going to go, but that decision, I was able to take a risk, and it made a huge difference because I wouldn't be wearing this ring here today if it hadn't taken that risk. So that's how I ended up in Anaheim. There's a picture of Randy in the middle. There's Sergei Fedorov, who was on the team when I first joined. You notice we're wearing the Mighty Ducks logo. I was on the last season we were called the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, so which is pretty cool. Okay, my daughter, who's 11 years old, she loves watching the Mighty Ducks movies, and I can tell her I played for that team. So when I first got to Anaheim, my role was as a 6th or 7th defenseman. I wasn't in the lineup at the start of the season because I was technically the 7th defenseman on the team, but I was just happy to be there. I had tried for 5 years. I finally made it. I was going to do everything I could in my power. Brian Burke sat me down. He was our general manager with Randy, and he said, I've got the 2nd pick on the waiver wire. So that means if there's another defenseman that comes along, I'm going to pick him up. You're going to go down to the minors. So that means you have to prove yourself every practice, every game. You have to treat every practice like it's a game, and treat every game like it's your last. That's what they told me. And I appreciated that because they told me good, bad, or different where I stood, and I knew my role in the team was don't let the other team score when I'm on the ice, and I excelled at it. I had a great first year. First year in the league we did fabulous. One of the cool things about Brian was his philosophy. He took over the team, this is his first year taking over the team, Randy's first year as a head coach, and we inherited a number of players like Sergei Fedorov, who was 36 years old. He was a bit long in the tooth in his career. Still a good player, but didn't fit that toughness, that edge that Brian Burke wanted us to have as a team. We inherited other players like Peter Sikora, some other Sandis Ojelin, some well-known guys that have been really skilled guys, but the identity of the team was shifting because of the leadership. So Brian had this vision where he wanted all of us to play with this edge, this toughness. So what he did was he ended up trading a lot of these guys. Now, to put that into perspective, like how we were doing when we first started my rookie season, we were actually 10th place at Christmas time. So not very good. Like we weren't going to make the playoffs. We were barely like above 500, and the expectations weren't very high for us. Like they weren't even high going into the season because the season before the lockout, the team didn't even make the playoffs. So we were not a team that was expected to do much. But Brian started to make these moves. He traded Sergei Fedorov. He brought in guys like Todd Marchand, Francois Beauchemin. Okay, he traded other guys like Peter Sikora, Sandis Ojelin, Keith Carney. He moved guys out that didn't fit that tough makeup that he was looking for. And he brought in guys that actually had less skill on paper than the guys he traded. But because they fit the core values of what we were looking for as a team, after Christmas, we went from the 10th seed in our conference to having the 2nd best record in all of hockey. Okay? We ended up finishing 6th overall in our conference because there was a lot of room we had to make up. But we had the 2nd best record after Christmas, and we ended up going into the playoffs and going all the way to the conference finals. Brian, in his book, you guys get a chance to read it, it's a great book. Okay? Brian Burke, he shared this near the beginning. I think it's page 47. Okay, so it's near the beginning of the book. He said this was the roster, the ghost roster he brought to the team. And all the teams he was general manager for. This was the ideal roster he wanted for every team. So there's no names here. This is just the makeup of the championship team that he put on paper. He had a vision for what that championship team was going to look like. And every team that he was the general manager for, whether it was in Toronto, Vancouver, Hartford, Anaheim, this was his vision. He wanted to get to this makeup. He said the only team that came close, or as close as he could have gotten to, was the Anaheim Ducks. And if you guys want to pick up the book and read it sometime, it's a great book, and you'll see all of these roles here. And then my role was here. So this is my role here. So I was the 3rd defense pair, size, hard to play against, fight when needed, finish checks hard, and penalty kill. That was me. So I had the sixth seat on the bus on the defense defense corps. But interestingly enough, he had his work cut out for him when he inherited the Mighty Ducks. And he did that work. He made some controversial decisions that paid off big time for us. So Berkey, a little bit on Berkey. He's a pretty gruff guy. I chose a picture here that kind of illustrated that. He doesn't like to wear a tie. I'm sure if anyone follows Brian Burke, that's his trademark. He was like that even before that became popular. He would come on the plane, he'd always have it undone, we'd always tease him. But he would come in the start of the season, and he always come in before it started, and he would give us the state of the address, like what's going on with the team, give us the vision for the team that year. And so after the 2005-2006 season, the year that we went all the way to the semifinals and lost to the Edmonton Oilers, that broke our hearts, but we were happy to be there. We made it to the Final Four. That was a great year for us. Then we traded for Chris Pronger. So after we traded for Chris Pronger, the hockey news, the Bible, everyone knows the hockey news, the Bible of hockey, right? The hockey news called us the team of destiny. So the team of destiny was what they called the Anaheim Ducks after the Chris Pronger trade. So when Brian Burke came in to give us the address for the year, came into our dressing room, our practice dressing room, and he was carrying the hockey news. And he was all riled up. We were like, what's Berkey, what's he gonna do? And so he started to talk. He said, boys, have you guys seen the hockey news? And many of us hadn't. We didn't know what he was talking about. And he showed us, he goes, boys, he says, team of destiny, the Anaheim Ducks. We are picked to be the team that's going to win the cup this year by the hockey news. He goes, isn't that great? And we knew that there was going to be something coming because he's not an optimistic guy. And then he followed it up by saying, guess how many teams they've predicted to win correctly over the last 8 years? 0. They're 0 for 8 in their predictions. So don't believe what they're writing about you. He said, not only that, every team that we're going to play this year we're going to have a target on our back, because it's no secret anymore that when you come to Anaheim, you're going to get a good game. Last year, we surprised a lot of teams. This year, there's not going to be any surprises anymore. Okay? The cool thing is that we took that and we adopted that vision. We then called ourselves the team of destiny as a joke during the season. We would say, hey boys, we're the team of destiny. And on the inside of our rings, it's inscribed, destiny is heart, sacrifice, and passion. And on the playoff run, we had a t-shirt that was made with the word passion on it, because that was Timo Solani's favorite word. He used passion a lot when he was trying to get us excited. We have to play with passion, boys. And then we created a second t-shirt for the second round that said, destiny is passion, because we were playing off of that team of destiny. And then in the third round, when we were playing against the Detroit Red Wings, we had another t-shirt that said, destiny is heart and passion. And then when we got to the finals against Ottawa, the t-shirt was destiny is heart, sacrifice, and passion, because it was 2 months of sacrifice, so we added that to it. So that's on the inscription of the ring. But that team of destiny, that created a vision for us as a team, that if we lost in the finals, that would have been considered a failure. Whereas the season before, it was considered a great season that we made it to the semifinals. We knew if we lost, even if it was in the finals, that was going to be a huge, huge, huge disappointment for everybody. So it was right from the beginning of the season, before we played our very first game, we expected to win the Stanley Cup. And that's what Brian Burke, that's what his leadership provided to our club. Okay, so starting that season off, we traded for Pronger. We went undefeated, which was an NHL record at the time. Chicago Blackhawks beat that record a few years later. But at the time, we went 16 games undefeated. Not all of them were wins, but we lost, I think, in a shootout a few times. And we were undefeated other than in shootout. So we had points in the first 16 games. And then we realized that we had a chance to win. This could be the year. So we started to believe, and that became part of our vision. One of the things I've learned during that season was in the playoffs. I mentioned I was a 6'7" defenseman. I played 76 of the 82 games, so I was in the lineup pretty much every night. I mean, the 6 games I had to sit out, they were for, I was a healthy scratch, which was hard, but I got myself back in the lineup. And then in the playoffs, I was in every game right through the first 2 rounds. Going into the semifinals against Detroit, We went into Detroit, we won one, lost one, which we considered a good thing. Detroit had arguably a better team than we did on paper. They had guys like Datsuk and Zetterberg and Nicholas Lidstrom. I heard a funny quote the other day was, who's the second best player on the Detroit Red Wings during that time? And the answer is whoever played with Nicholas Lidstrom. And that's pretty accurate. Nicholas Lidstrom is the best player I ever played against. So we played against Nicholas Lidstrom, all those guys. We split the first 2 games back to Anaheim. And if you can imagine, we're coming home, won game 2, going into game 3. We're pretty excited in the finals, or in the semifinals. Now we're at home ice. We've always played well at home. And we get into game 3, and when we looked at the scoreboard at the 3rd period, it read 6-0 for Detroit Red Wings. And 6-0 in the playoffs, in the semifinals, in front of our home crowd. Talk about embarrassment. And on top of that, Chris Pronger got suspended. He elbowed Thomas Holmstrom, caught him for a bunch of stitches. They suspended him for only 1 game. I don't know how it was just for 1 game, but it was just for 1 game. And as a result, Rick Jackman got inserted into the lineup. Well, Rick is from Barrie, Ontario, my home where I was born. And Rick came in all excited, hadn't been in the lineup for a couple months. He had more of an offensive upside than I did. And in game 4, we came out and we won the game, and Rick got the game-winning goal. So that sounds great. It was great. Unfortunately for me, Rick had such a strong performance that I was now out of the lineup. So now I'm watching from the stands. We went on to win game 5 and 6, and we ended up winning the Detroit series miraculously, which again they ended up winning the next year. But we won that year, and we kind of stole the series, and that was all great. We went into the finals, playing against Ottawa the first 2 games at home. Arnold Schwarzenegger's in town to drop the opening puck. I'm not in the lineup. I'm actually sitting in the dressing room watching the game from the dressing room. So it was a really hard time emotionally for me. Even though I'm happy for the team, I'm torn because of everything that's going on. Then I have to sit out and watch it. And so in game 3, we're in Ottawa, and we're winning 2-0, 3-1. We end up losing the game 5-3. And on top of that, Chris Pronger gets suspended again. So Chris gets suspended, another elbow. Not as bad as the first one, but still, he was out for another game. And the good thing about that was that I now was getting an opportunity to come back in the lineup. So now I've got all the media in Ottawa. Can you imagine Ottawa, the city, in Canadian City in the finals? I think there's 50% of the cars when we were in the city had the Ottawa flag. We had a police escort back and forth from the hotel, from the airport. There was fans that would realize we were the Anaheim Ducks on the bus. They were giving us the finger and cursing us like through the city. It was pretty hostile for us. So going into that game in the dressing room, the media's around me and they're saying, "Joe, what are you going to do? How are you going to replace Chris Pronger in the lineup?" And I mean, that's how do you answer that? Like I'm a journeyman defenseman. This is Chris Pronger, Hall of Famer. And so I just said, I'm not Chris Pronger. I'm going to be Joe DiPenta tonight, and I'm going to come in and play my game. But I was so nervous. Imagine, finals, never played in the finals before in my life in the Stanley Cup, and I'm in Ottawa. There's all this hostility. I hadn't played in 3 weeks, so I hadn't been in a game. Trying to stay in shape, but just so all these things are going through my mind. I've never been more nervous in my life for a game. I get into the first period, and I can tell the coaches are not putting me on the ice because they're not sure they can trust me. There hasn't been in the lineup for a while. They're really limiting my ice time. They're rolling 4 or 5 defensemen. And then as the period went on, I had some good shifts. I'm starting to build some momentum for the team, and now I'm starting to get more of a regular shift. Second period comes around. I've made some really strong plays, and by the end of the game, I played the best game of my career. Okay, that's what it was. It was the best game of my career. And we ended up down 1-0 after the first period. Our coach came in between the periods and yelled at us all, which you don't usually get during the playoffs. Usually your coach is pretty hands off. He yelled at us, gave it to us exactly when we needed. We went out in the second and third period. We took the game over. We won the game 3-1 in Ottawa. Went back home and closed it out. Okay, so but my lesson in that was the adversity that I experienced going through, sitting out, having to watch how painful that was. When I got inserted back in that lineup, there was going to be no way that I was going to come back out. I wasn't going to let that happen. And on top of that, Chris Pronger, I looked up to, one of my teammates. I wasn't going to let him feel bad about getting suspended. So I was going to do everything I could to help him so he didn't feel bad at the end of the game. And so that's what it was. That's what teamwork's about. That's when you get each other's backs. And after we won, and we were celebrating about a week later, he came up to me and he put his arm around me. It was at the end of the night, and he was really emotional. And he said, "Thank you for what you did, for coming in and saving my butt during the playoffs." And it meant the world to me that he recognized that, because that's what I think drove me to have such a strong game. And so that was a really big lesson I learned, was that adversity and overcoming that adversity. I thought I'd share with you some of the celebration photos and walk you through what that looks like. I'll end with my day with a cup here in Halifax and in Dartmouth. So that's a photo of us winning on the ice. And I got a bit of a snapshot of the video from the dressing room. That's from the Hockey Hall of Fame. Phil Pritchard, the keeper of the cup. Still the same guy, the white gloves. He sent me that video, which is pretty cool. All right, so here's some snapshots from the celebration. I'm going to show you the first one. We got Timu on the far left. He's the man. We used to call him the caveman because he talks like a caveman. And he always said the word passion. In his broken English, passion. Boys, we have to have passion. So we kind of gently made fun of him, even though when people ask me about Timo, he never had a bad day in his life. Shows up anywhere he is, never in a bad mood. I've never seen him with a frown. He's never had a bad day. I remember he was standing behind me, we were doing a drill, and the coach, Randy, who was pretty ornery coach, he said he'd blow the whistle and he would give it to us. And Timo was behind me, and he was like yelling at us pretty bad during practice. And Timo said, "Not gonna ruin my day." And that's Timo Solani. And this is me with the champagne. It's another one, a couple more. So that's my family, my wife, and my mom and dad. They were at the game. When we were, Hockey Night in Canada was, one of the cool stories is my mom and dad were at the game, and my sisters and my grandmother were not at the game. They were in Dartmouth watching the game from their house. And I was on the ice, and they could actually see me in the background celebrating, and I was on my cell phone. And they were like, "Skate behind Ron McLean right now." And I'd skate over behind Ron McLean and I'd wave like this. It was pretty cool. I actually called my buddies too. They never forget that phone call. I get to call my best friends growing up, Nick and Pat and all the guys, Brian's nephew. Nick was my best friend growing up. It was really neat. They remember that phone call. Cuba Gooding Jr., some other celebrities were at the game. Snoop Dogg was probably there too. He's a big Mighty Ducks fan. So we got Cuba Gooding Jr., that's my dad. So I get to meet some cool people. Some other highlights from the celebration. So we had a big parade in Anaheim. We had a big bus that go through. There's not much of a downtown in Anaheim, so it wasn't like you'd see in Chicago or some of these other bigger cities, but it was so really cool. We had all these fans that came together to see us at the Honda Center. I was able to carry the cup in on the red carpet, which was pretty cool. And then lastly, the Governor was there, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Eventually I did get to meet my hero, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Conan the Barbarian. These are all the Terminator. These were my favorite movies as a kid. So not sure I should have been watching them, but those are the movies I was watching when I was 5 or 6, 7 years old. So I got to meet my childhood hero and realize that he's really not that big in person. He's wide, but he wasn't that big. But it was really cool to shake his hand and get to meet him. Some of the other celebrations. So we had the Stanley Cup for a couple weeks, and we're taking it around Anaheim area. One of the things that struck us, when we came out of the arena, they had a party for us in the parking lot, and we were partying for a few hours in the dressing room. But when we came out, it was like a ghost town. There was nobody there. Like it was like everyone was happy when they're at the game, but as soon as they went home, that was it. It was over. They went home, and like the difference, if that had been in Vancouver or some of those other big cities in Canada, like it would have been a riot. It would have been all these things. It was just like a ghost town. And then when we would take it down the next day, we took it down to the beach, and you can see this is a photo on the beach, the Newport Beach. We would take it around. We were carrying the Stanley Cup. It's just a big trophy. They're carrying it around, and people came up to us and they said, "What is that?" We were like, "That's a Stanley Cup." And they're like, "What's that?" This is the difference in Southern California as opposed to here. Now, when I had the Stanley Cup down at the Westin on the day of the Cup, it was like, that was a celebrity. It was like, Joe DiPenta who? It was the Stanley Cup. That was a celebrity.
The guy brought the cup.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'd carry the thing and everyone looked at the cup, not at me. Like the difference in Canada and the US. So I was struck by that. We had a party at the owner's house. The owners had a beautiful house on the water, and they had a fireworks display. There was a big barge out in the water, and we were like, "What's that big boat doing out there?" And it was for fireworks they did at the end of the night, which was really cool. That's Timu, Rob Niedermeyer, Travis Moen. And this is me and Berkey with a photo. He loved to get his picture taken. You can tell from the photo. I asked him at the end of the night, and he was like, "Okay, whatever." And took a picture, but my day with the Stanley Cup. That was a pretty memorable day. Started at 6 a.m. at Cole Harbour Place. The reason when we started at Cole Harbour Place is that's where it all started for me. Plus, it was a good place for us to congregate. We had a bus that was donated to us by ambassadors. They gave us this bus for the day. The reason why that was a big deal is because we all could travel on the same vehicle, as opposed to having like 10 or 12 different cars going to different sites. We all could be organized. Plus, there's a bathroom on it, which was good for bathroom breaks, that sort of thing. So we were a very well organized day. Started off there. I love this picture of my buddy. This is my buddy Nick. This is Brian's nephew. You can't tell from back there, but he's looking at the Stanley Cup. He was just like, "What am I looking at here? Like, this is so cool." Reading all the names. So I had about 25, 30 people on that bus, all of the VIP people in my life. We went to the IWK, was the first place we went. That was one of the reasons why ambassadors gave us the bus, and that's the Children's Hospital here in Halifax. So we took it there. I had a history of going to the Children's Hospital playing for the Halifax Mooseheads, and I'll share a story, the powerful story that happened, but we took it there. Very, very monumental day. Some cool stories have happened over the years. People that were at the hospital with their kids have come up to me and said, "I remember when you took the Stanley Cup to the Children's Hospital. I was there. I have this was my son, and now he's grown up, he's all better now." Like those types of stories. It was really, really powerful. Another guy had put his baby inside the cup, and I met the baby. Was at my hockey camp in the summer, so that was cool. We took it to Dartmouth Crossing, which is a local shopping area, outside shopping area. We did an autograph signing there, and I had a really powerful moment that happened at Dartmouth Crossing. I mentioned that I had a history of going to the IWK Children's Hospital. While I was going to these visits, I met a girl with leukemia. And this girl named Jessica, we became friends, but after the season ended, I went on my way. I played 70 more years, and I didn't know what happened to her. We lost touch. She was faithful to coming to all the games, and when I was playing for Halifax, for the Mooseheads. Well, I was standing after doing an interview at the Dartmouth Crossing, and a couple of teenage girls came up to me. And one came right up to me and she said, "Do you remember me?" And I don't know if you've ever had somebody ask you that question before. Like, have you ever had somebody say, "Do you remember me?" and you don't?
Yeah.
It's a very unpleasant feeling, because you're going to be like, yeah, I know who you are, and they know right away you don't. So she asked me that question, and there was hundreds of people around, like lots of distractions, lots of reasons why I wouldn't know who this person was, right? And I don't know what came over me, but I looked at her and I said, "Jessica," and she said, "Yeah, I'm all better now." And she gave me a big hug, it was the best moment of that entire day. So a year later, I was asked to get involved to raise money for children in cancer in Anaheim, and I remember thinking, it was in the summertime, and I was focusing on the next year, and I thought to myself, I don't have time to go organize an event and fundraise and do all these things that they're asking me to do. And then I thought of the moment the year before. I thought of Jessica, that hug that I had, and remembering that she had survived leukemia, and I said, all right, I'll do it. And so I've been involved with Leukemia Lymphoma Society now. I just finished this would be my 13th year raising money for that charity, and I've been doing it ever since. And it was really because of that moment with Jessica and meeting her and going to the Children's Hospital. So that was a really powerful moment. This is my house that I grew up in. So we did a parade starting at my elementary school, and we went by my house. This is where I played street hockey, and my parents didn't live in this house any longer, but all of the neighbors came out that I knew, grew up with. Even the neighbors where I used to ruin their lawn with my rollerblades, they came out. And this is at Cole Harbour Place. So this is, we ended the parade at Cole Harbour Place where I had started my career, where I got beat up on the Mooseheads. That's the same rink right here. And this is me being able to lift the Stanley Cup. I took it into the room with some of the midget AAA team, my former team. That was a really powerful moment. They still had, they put together this case for me. This was before Sid. I had my case before Sid. This is a lot bigger than mine, but yeah, it was a really amazing day. My Nana, who's since passed, she had Alzheimer's. She wasn't able to come out because she was sick. But we were able to take the Stanley Cup to visit with her, which was really powerful and cool to be able to share it with her a couple of years before she passed away. So that was an amazing time. And then we had a big party at the Kennard Center. So the Kennard Center's down here. We had about 300 people. So it was pretty intimate for the first part of the day. We took it around, and then at the end of the night, we wanted to share it with all the people that had helped on that journey. I say I probably took 2,000 photos that day. Like, I'm not even exaggerating, like, because everyone wanted the photo with the cup and with me. I felt like it was like 3 weddings. Like, that's what it felt like. Now, at the end of the night, I took the cup back to the West End. We had the suite at the top, and I invited just a handful of people, and I did that on purpose, because at midnight I was exhausted, and I was thankful I did it, but it was also a time when I just wanted to be with my closest friends, and I shared it with everybody, and that's what that day was all about, was to share with as many people as we possibly could. So I had coaches there, everyone that had been part of it, and we wanted to share it. I even got a picture of my grandmother drinking from the cup, which was pretty cool. She was drinking beer out of it. So we had the Trailer Park Boys. If anyone's ever watched the Trailer Park Boys, if you remember them. We had Cam, my idol Cam Russell. We had J.S. Shigera was in town because his wife is from Halifax, so he came down to visit and celebrated. Mayor Mike Savage, who was a member of Parliament at the time, he was also there. So I put in some of those key people that ended up being there. But it was just an amazing time. So this was a day in the life of an NHL player. This was the view from my balcony when I lived in Newport Beach. I got to meet guys like Snoop Doggy Dogg, like celebrities, because I was in the LA area. Like, this is one of my teammates was Chris Kunitz, who's often under the radar as one of the players in that team. As people forget, guys like Perry Getzlaff were rookies, and Chris Kunitz was a rookie or second-year player. Guys that were really support guys in that team. They weren't the big stars, but they played a big role. We had such a great team. Played in front of 20,000 fans. This was after practice, signing autographs. That was pretty much the norm. So it was just an amazing 3 years. Also throw in a photo of the White House, and the White House, and got to meet George W. Bush, which was cool the next year. This was the final few months of his presidency. We got to go to the Oval Office and check that out. So that was pretty cool too. My last lesson is life after hockey. I know some people have mentioned that they're interested in life after, what happens to players. That transition, it's a really difficult transition. Is anyone in the room retired? Did anyone find it hard going through retirement? No? Just me? Just me? Well, I found it really difficult because my identity was wrapped up in hockey.
We used to retire at 35, 40.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
You guys didn't like what you did. Well, it was hard for me because I had been a hockey player since I could remember. And when I went through retirement, and I'm not retired now, I do other things I'll share in a second, but when I went through the transition, I say, from playing hockey to something new, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no idea. I thought about it for 3 years or so. I just really didn't understand what that was going to be. So it was a really, really traumatic time, really stressful time, anxious time, and so that was back in 2011. I went back to university, and what I realized, looking back on all of it, I had the world by the tail. I had all these things, accomplished so many great things. Those things don't equal happiness. All those things I accomplished, winning the Stanley Cup, Calder Cup, playing in the NHL, all of those dreams that I achieved, none of that equates to happiness. It's fun, they're great, amazing moments. I wouldn't change it for the world, but it doesn't equal a lifelong, you're going to be happy for the rest of your life. That's not what it's about. Okay, so that's the last lesson in life, is that it's, and these are, I just put in some photos. This is my family here down at Rainbow Haven Beach. I got into the charitable fundraising world. got to take their Stanley Cup back to the IWK maybe 5 years ago, kind of reminiscing of when I took it there on the day of the Stanley Cup. And now I'm an executive leadership team coach. So I work with entrepreneurs. I have a practice. It's a ton of fun. I'm busy. I get to travel. I've got some clients in California. I've got clients here. And I'm working with entrepreneurs. There's a lot of similarities between entrepreneurs and professional athletes that I've come to realize and appreciate. These guys and gals, they're responsible. 3% are responsible for 66% of the jobs in the economy. Like, these guys are taking risks. They are putting their life on the line, chasing a dream, lots of failure that goes with it, lots of adversity, lots of lessons they've learned. They take responsibility for everything they do. And so I've gotten a chance to work with some really smart, really amazing people. So that's what I do today as a profession, and it's a ton of fun. Okay? But yeah, I've learned that really the success doesn't equal happiness. Okay, so that's one of the lessons. And I close with this. So part of what I've learned in my life now is that faith is a really big part of my life. I've really embraced that as a key pillar, and without it, I'm really lost. And so I was actually the second last hockey player to use a wooden hockey stick. All right, so that's an interesting fact. The other guy was named Mark Watton. He was on a contract with the Bridgeport, which is New York Islanders farm team. He played one other season than I did. Otherwise, I'd own the record. Okay, so he played one other year. So 2011, that meant that me and Mark were, out of 1,500 NHL signed contracted players, we were the only guys who used a wooden hockey stick. All right, so here's my wooden hockey stick. I brought it with me. Now, you guys had a chance to pick it up. It is, I don't know how I used it. Like, I couldn't play hockey with it now. Like, I've lost a lot of strength over the years, and like, this would be pretty hard for me to play with these days. But I used to yield this thing around like it was nothing. It's really, really heavy. But I had everyone trying to convince me to switch to a composite stick. That's what all the players use today, is that it's a much lighter. Everyone would tell me your shot's gonna be better. My coaches would work with me from, gosh, it was probably like my last 7 or 8 years pro. They were all trying to get me to switch. I even had the opposing team come to me and say, you should really think about switching. Have you looked around? There's nobody using this technology anymore. But I just was really familiar to me. Like, I knew that when I caught a puck, would catch a pass, it wouldn't bounce. It just had like a security to it. And that's why I love the wooden hockey stick. But I thought, okay, third of the games left to go in my career. I'm gonna give it a shot. So I practiced with it, and I said, all right, I know I'm gonna retire. I don't have anything to lose, no one to impress anymore. I'm not gonna be looking for a contract next year. I'll try this composite stick. And I remember after the first game, I thought to myself, wow, the stick really is a lot lighter. My shot, I almost scored a couple goals out there tonight. And that's when I started to realize that, and that's how I like to explain my life now, is like, when I introduce faith into my life, it's like I can see the world in a whole other dimension. Just things are a lot lighter, they're not as heavy. And when I went through that really difficult time through retirement, where I just felt that weight of the world on my shoulders, now I have a place to surrender it all. And so my life is just so much more full and complete as a follower of Jesus and what I'm doing today. And so it's just been, my lesson is, all of those accomplishments are great. I'm so happy they happen, and I celebrate them and still have fond memories, but it doesn't give me happiness today. I don't rely on that for happiness. It's really that relationship that I have with God and with other people through that relationship, and that's what I'm doing today is I'm really pursuing my dreams, but they're new dreams. And I'm excited for what God has planned next to me. So I want to thank you guys for listening to my story and having to share it with you guys. And thank you guys so much.
Thanks a lot, Joe. That was great. I don't know if you want to take a few questions. Is that cool? Or yeah.
And I say this as a longtime Vancouver Canucks fan.
Yeah.
Long suffering, no cups, and what is there, 3 cups in Southern California?
There is 3.
How do you feel hockey has immersed itself into the Southern California culture? I mean, you hear about more kids playing hockey.
Yeah, there was a lot of youth hockey, and their strategy. The Dallas Stars introduced a strategy where they went around and they built rinks and they bought rinks and they created a minor hockey program because they knew that would be the future of their fan base. And then Anaheim did the same thing. The Samueli family that owned the Ducks, they were buying up rinks, roller rinks, converting them to ice rinks. And now today there's several rinks out there. There's actually a 4-pad in Irvine, California, where the Ducks now practice. But it became part of the culture, and a lot of kids were playing hockey there. And so that strategy seems to be working. And I think the LA too. LA, they have a pretty good foundation there for minor hockey, and they developed it there as well. So that's been the strategy for most expansion teams, is they look to build it up from the youth, knowing that 20 years from now they're going to be they're also going to be asking the parents to take them to the games. So that's what I observed there. But still, it's not the same as Canada. It's not the same as, or I say like the original 6 teams, where like Boston and like teams where they have hockey's part of the culture more so. It's still fairly new there, but definitely it's quite popular. Yep, in the back.
You didn't touch much on your AHL career. What did you have a bigger hand in, winning the Calder Cup or the Stanley Cup?
Good question. I'd say probably equal. I was the same 6 defenseman on the American Hockey League team in Chicago, where I won the Calder Cup. I was traded 3 months before we won, so I came into the team new and had to acclimatize and figure out my role. There was also a lot of defensemen. There was like 9 or 10 defensemen, and I ended up getting into the lineup all those games. But yeah, it was part of also discovering my identity as being that 6th defenseman, being accountable and earning my teammates' respect. It was kind of like a next stage of my journey in developing who I became in Anaheim. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Winning any championship. The cool thing about that championship was we were the 7th seed in the conference. I think it's right. No, we were the 8th seed. We were the 8th seed in our conference. We made the playoffs, and back then they made the 9th and 8th seed play off against each other in a lightning round for 3 games. Best out of 3. So 8th seed didn't make the playoffs necessarily. We had to play against ironically, the Cincinnati Mighty Ducks, the farm team of the Anaheim, and we lost the first game at home. Second game was at home as well. All 3 games were at home. And in the second game, we were in overtime. All the players in our team just wanted to go home. We all wanted to go home. We wanted to have a big party. It was a disappointing year, and that was honestly the mentality. Like we expected to lose, and the overtime, the net was about this, like this. If you imagine that this was like this, I was in the corner over here, and our goalie was here. The net was here, and their player got the puck like this, okay, in overtime, and all he had to do was go like this and skate it into the net and score a goal. He could have taken 2 or 3 seconds with nobody around him and could have just skated it into the net. Instead, he got the puck and he panicked. And instead of taking his time with the goalie out of the net and everything, he fired it as soon as he got it, and this was their top goal scorer. And he shot it off the far post and out. We went on to win the game, win the series, and then we won 4 other rounds and won the Calder Cup. And we had to beat every first seed in order to win. So we played the first seed in our division and we beat them. We played the first seed in the other division and beat them. Then we had to play the first seed in the conference and beat them. And then we beat the first seed in the entire league in the finals to win. So it was like, it became like a matter of, well, we've come this far, we might as well win. That became our mentality. So the first 2 or 3 rounds was like, yeah, this will be over soon. We're gonna go home, we'll party, and we just all like became really like close to each other. And then we got to the semifinals, and we're like, gosh, we're here. We might as well win this thing. And so that became our mentality. And we won the last 2 rounds 4-1 and 4-1. But every other series went the full distance.